Oh, buddy, have I got a treat for you guys, especially on the casual side. So then we're going to look at what I've just built this evening. I finally went back and did it. I've been wanting to do it for a minute. But it's Anje Falkenrath. It's a very casual deck, but it's pretty fun to play, and it's not the typical build, but we'll go through it really quick. So this is one of the first commander decks that I actually built myself. Well, I bought it, but then played it and made some adjustments to it. So it's the first one I really messed with. So I was pretty excited to come back to it. I've been wanting to for a while, so I've been collecting a lot of cards specifically with this in mind, and I finally put it together this evening. And I played a couple of test games against some of the other casual decks that I've built. And I mean, it's interesting. So let's go with it right off the top. So with Anye, what you're looking at here is you've got a red, a black, and a colorless 1/3. She has haste. She's a vampire. Tap, discard a card, draw a card. Whenever you discard a card, if it has madness, you untap her. So traditionally with this deck, you're putting a lot of madness cards into it so that you can cycle through that deck really quick and you can play them. A lot of times whenever you do the madness, you discard a card as madness. It doesn't go into exile. It goes into the madness zone, and you pay it for its madness cost, and you can play it. And a lot of times they're cheaper than if you were to play it with its normal mana cost. So that's usually the strategy that people go with. And then you dump a lot of stuff out there, and then you blink it with Worldgorger Dragon, which is in here. It's in this build. But, it's not, that's not really how I'm running with this. This deck will make you work for the win. It's pretty fun. So we'll start off with the creatures. Right off the top, I've got Agent of Stromgarld, which is 1 red. He's a knight. And he's got red, add black mana to your mana pool, play abilities interrupt. It's pretty cool to siphon stuff into it. Then you got Archfiend of Ifnir, which is going to be one of the ways to police up the creatures your opponents have. 2 black, 3 colorless, demon, flying, 5/4. When you cycle or discard another card, put a -1 counter on each creature your opponents control. And he has cycling himself for 2. So with this deck, you're discarding a lot of stuff. You're chunking it to Anye. There's a few things that have cycling, but not much. But this is one of my favorite cards of all time, really. You can do a lot with this card. It's great in mono black. It's good in general. So the next one is going to be Ardent Elementalist. 1 red, 3 colorless, Human Shaman. This is from the new Innistrad. So when Ardent Elementalist enters the battlefield, return target instant sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. There's a lot of other ways to do this, but I try to keep the cost of this deck low, but I mean it wound up being like some $200 some. Anyway, this is a pretty decent option to bring stuff back. It's a creature, so you can sacrifice it. You can bring it back because it is a creature. But there's a lot of sorceries and instants that you want to play back again that you either have chunked from Anye or, you want to just bring them back. The next one is Blazing Rootwalla, one of the better madness cards in here. So 1 red, and he has a red Blazing Rootwalla, gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Activate this only once each turn. He's 1/1. But the great thing is you have a madness cost of 0. So you sack him, do your madness cost when you discard them into the madness zone, you just pay 0 to put them on the battlefield. So it's pretty great. You have a little sack outlet with that one. But you're triggering her so that you can draw again. Conspiracy Theorist is really what makes this deck run. It's another engine inside of this deck. So you've got 1 red, 1 colorless, Human Shaman. When Conspiracy Theorist attacks, you may pay 1 colorless and discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Whenever you discard one or more non-land cards, you may exile one of them from your graveyard. If you do, you may cast it this turn. So he gives a quasi-madness to some of the cards that you're discarding. It is not madness, but it is going to allow you to play those cards again. The interesting thing about this is that whenever you're discarding a madness card, it's not going to be working with Conspiracy Theorists as far as playing it from the graveyard because it goes to the madness zone. You play it from there. However, for everything else, which you'll see, there's a lot more of other stuff besides Madness. There's maybe 4 or 5, maybe even just 3 Madness cards in this deck. We're really just going for the card draw consistently from her. The next one is Dragon Rage Channeler. 1 red for 1/1. When you cast a non-creature spell, surveil 1. Look at the top card of your library. You may put that card into your graveyard. As Delirium, as long as there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, Dragon's Rage Channel gets +2/+2, has flying, and attacks each combat if able. So with this deck, it's going to be really easy to be able to get that +2/+2 with flying. But the other thing too is that when you're casting these non-creature spells, which there are quite a few, you're surveilling. So you can either, chuck it into your graveyard to play it later, or you can look at it and know what you want to draw next. Undeath Dracolich is next. 2 black, 2 colorless, legendary creature, zombie dragon. Flash, has flying. He is a 5/2. When he enters the battlefield, tapped. You may cast the Dracolith from your graveyard if a creature not named Eldith Dracolith died this turn. So I put this in here because you can get yourself a beater with a 5/2 that has flying. You can flash them in, and a lot of times you can chunk them too from Anje. The next one will be Florian, Voldrin Scion, a red, a black, a colorless, legendary creature, Vampire Noble. Has first strike, it's a 3/3. This is one of the newer ones too from the Innistrad. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, look at the top X card of your library, where X is the total amount of life your opponent's lost this turn. Exile one of those cards and put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. You may play the exile card this turn. Now keep in mind you still have to pay the mana cost for this because you are playing it. But it's just a really neat ability, because you do put quite a bit of damage into your opponent from this deck. So Glinthorn Buccaneer, 2 red, 1 colorless, Minotaur Pirate. He has haste, he's a 2/4. When you discard a card, Glinthorn Buccaneer deals 1 damage to each opponent. And you can pay 1 red, 1 colorless to discard a card and draw a card. Activate this ability only if Glinthorn Buccaneer is attacking. So this guy's really cool because you're doing a lot of discarding, so you're able to chunk out a lot of these 1 damage to each of your opponents. He's a staple in this deck for a while, since this deck came out, really. And then that paying a red and a colorless to discard a card and draw a card, that's pretty solid. If you can't get it with Anje and you still need to do it, then you can do it with Glinthorn Buccaneer. The next one you've got is Goldspan Dragon, which really makes it tick quite a bit, I believe. So you've got 2 red, 3 colorless, dragon, flying, haste, 4/4. When Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. Treasures you control have tap. Sacrifice this artifact, add 2 mana of any 1 color. So this is going to be one way to help you really ramp up whatever you want to play, so you can play some of those bigger spells. I mean, he's another beater. There's a bunch of dragons in this deck, to be fair, now that I think about it. And in fact, Hellkite Tyrant, 2 red, 4 colorless, flying, trample. Whenever Hellkite Tyrant deals combat damage to a player, gain control of all artifacts that player controls. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 20 or more artifacts, you win the game. So I mean, it's possible that you could wind up getting these 20 or more artifacts. I was mainly running this with one-on-ones whenever I was testing against some other decks. You can pick up some really neat stuff with this. You get yourself a 6/5 beater with this guy. You have that trample on him. But I mean, he's just a solid dragon. Iron Mirror is a mana dork, really. So 2 colorless, and you tap to add 1 red mana to your mana pool. Then you've got Jaya Ballard, Task Mage, 2 red, 1 colorless, legendary creature, Spell Shaper. 1 red, tap, discard a card, destroy target blue permanent. It's a little bit narrow, but it could come in handy, I'm sure. 1 red, 1 colorless, tap, discard a card, Jaya Ballard, Task Mage, does 3 damage to any target. A creature dealt damage this way can't be regenerated this turn. And then 2 red, 5 colorless, tap, discard a card, Jaya Ballard deals 6 damage to each creature and each player. So you'll see that a lot of this direct damage stuff will come in handy pretty good later on, because whenever you start playing this and you're slinging out that damage, there are certain cards that I put in here that give that damage that you're doing death touch, which will be a pretty interesting thing. We'll get to that pretty close then, I'm pretty sure here. So then next thing is Master Cruelties. 1 red, 1 black, 3 colorless. First strike, death touch, 1/4. Master of Cruelties can only attack alone. When Master of Cruelties attacks a player and isn't blocked, that player's life total becomes 1. Master of Cruelties assigns no damage to combat. So, I mean, I put this guy in here. I mean, why wouldn't you? You know, it's a good little win con that you can do. You know, getting it all down to 1 and then you ping them for 1 damage. It's really easy to do. Also, a lot of times, you know, you could play them or cheat them out after a board wipe and swing with them next turn. Necroglyph, one of the few madness cards that I've got in here. So 2 black, 3 colorless. Necroglyph power is equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player discards a card. And he has a madness cost, which is a big deal here. He's got 2 black, 1 colorless. So that whenever you discard him, a lot of times you're just playing him for the madness cost rather than paying for that 5 to play this guy. And the great thing about this deck is you're really chunking and churning through your deck, and there's a lot of removal in here of your opponent's creatures too. So usually whenever you bring him out, he'll be fairly decent sized. You know, the 2 or 3 times that I played him this evening when I played testing me, he would come out as a 3 or a 4, and he'd get even bigger after that. We've got Neheb, Dreadhorde Champion. So 2 red, 2 colorless, legendary creature, zombie, minotaur, warrior. It's a 5/4 trample. When he deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, you may discard any number of cards. If you do, draw that many cards and add that much red mana. Until in a turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. So with this one, it's a pretty solid way to stock the graveyard, to get some more discards out, to stock to your mana, add to your mana pool. So I like this guy a lot. Orcus, Prince of Undeath. This is a new one as well. This is from Forgotten Realms. So you've got red, black, 2 colorless, and X colorless. Flying, trample, 5/3. When Orcus, Prince of Undeath, enters the battlefield, choose 1. Each other creature gets neg X till end of turn. You lose X life. Or return up to X target creature cards with total mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. They gain haste until end of turn. That's a great option to be able to just chunk all your stuff out from your graveyard that you've been cycling in there with your discarding off of Anje. Yeah, it's a pretty basic graveyard strategy, but he's pretty cool little ability there, and it's not too expensive really when you think about it. So Pestilent Spirit, another thing that I really built this deck with in mind, and I try to get it out as much as I can, especially if there's a lot of creatures on the board. So he's got 1 black, 2 colorless. He has Menace and Death Touch, and he's a 3/2. But this is what really makes it go. It's instant and sorcery spells you control have Death Touch. Any amount of damage they deal to a creature is enough to destroy it. So you'll find that there's a lot of little pinging, 1 damage to all creatures in here. Now you'll hit, you hit your own guys, and you'll probably get Pestilent Spirit as well. But it's a pretty cool ability to be able to make some of these little cheap one damage board wipes happen. Then we got Rakdos, Lord of Riots, 2 red, 2 black. You can't cast a spell unless the opponent lost life this turn. Easy to do in this deck. Flying and Trample for 6/6. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each 1 life your opponent's lost this turn. So he's a pretty solid option. I mean, heck, you're running with a 4-drop 6/6 out here with Flying and Trample, and then he's making your creature spells cost 1 less. Then we've got Robber of the Rich. 1 red, 1 colorless. He has Reach. Haste, he's a 2/2. When Robber of the Rich attacks, if defending player has more cards in hand than you, exile the top card of your library. During any turn you attacked with a rogue, you may cast that card, and you may spend mana as over mana of any color to cast that spell. I'm pretty sure this is the only rogue in the deck, but Robber of the Rich is a solid card so that you can get some of these free casts off. Well, not really free cast, but you can cast some of your opponent's stuff. As far as making them unblockable, if you really wanted to build around this, there's a way to do it, and especially in red. There's a lot of things that make stuff unblockable. But I haven't really played it yet, but I've got it in here. So Riding Registrar, 1 black, 2 colorless. At the beginning of your upkeep, discard a card. He's a 7/6. So it's pretty awesome that you're getting a 7/6 for 3. The beginning of your upkeep, you're discarding that card. But a lot of times when you're playing this, you're planning ahead for it. With the amount of card draw that you're getting off of Anje, you're probably going to be chunking a lot of lands. That's what I found that I've been doing, is just throw away land. And either that or you throw away Riding Registrar and bring him out later on. But yeah, he's a solid choice. I've had him in here before. Last year, whenever I first got this deck and I was playing it, well, actually it was back in the early part of 20 when I was playing this. This was the first thing that I added to it, and I've kept it in there for a long time, and it was pretty cool to see him back again. Seder, Fire Dancer, red, 1 colorless. He's an enchantment creature Seder. When an instant or sorcery spell you control deals damage to an opponent, Seder Fire Dancer deals that much damage to target creature that player controls. So the neat thing about that Seder Fire Dancer is really that you can maximize what you're doing here with the damage that's going to be done to your opponents, and we'll get to that in a minute. But also you can stack that onto your creatures, and if you have that Death Touch from Pestilent Spirit, you're good to go. Okay, so let's see here. Let's move on to the next one. So next you've got Shieldred Whispering One. It's a 2 black, 5 colorless, legendary creature Praetor, 6/6 with Swamp Walk. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that's pretty sweet. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player sacrifices a creature. Hell, this is a commander its own self. It's pretty solid. You have a stock graveyard most of the time. A lot of your creatures, either they're dying to board wipes, or you've chunked them with Anje's ability. So this is a good way to bring them back. And then you're forcing your opponent to sack a creature as well. Oh man, then we got the the big baddie, the Worldgorger Dragon. So 3 red, 3 colorless, flying trample for a 7/7. When Worldgorger Dragon comes into play, remove all of the permanents you control from the game. When Worldgorger Dragon leaves play, return their removed cards to play under their owner's control. So, a lot of times you're like, this is not a very good card. But what you're doing with this is that you're removing what you have and returning it, and it'll come into play untapped whenever it returns to the battlefield. You just have to find a way to remove it itself, or it dies out. There's a whole play line to this, and I haven't really messed around with it yet to see exactly how I want to play it, but I've got it in there. Next we have Enchantment. So we got Death Pits of Wrath for the first enchantment. So 2 black, 3 colorless. When any creature is dealt damage, destroy it. That creature cannot be regenerated this turn. So that'll be for blocking, and it's really big for the mass spells that you're slinging out here too. Then we've got Greed. So this is just going to be a good card draw ability. You've got 1 black, 3 colorless. You pay 1 black and pay 2 life to draw a card. And you can do that any number of times as long as you have the mana and you have the life to play it. So if you're not able, you don't want to discard cards, you need to stock your hand up for something, then Greed's the way to go. Tortured Existence, 1 black, and then you have 1 black, choose and discard a creature card. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is really good to get some of the stuff back if it got hit by a board wipe. Or of course, you've chunked it with Anje's ability, which is discarding that card. Then another great thing that'll make your graveyard tick, makes any graveyard tick, and is the best thing about red these days. Underworld Breach. 1 red, 1 colorless. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. So, there's not much else I can say about this one. You're going to be stocking your graveyard up, obviously, off all these discards you're going to be doing. And then everything else that's dying, all these spells that you're burning off too, Underworld Breach is going to be able to play those back for you. Hell, this is used in CEDH so that you can abuse Lion's Eye Diamond. You can do all kinds of things with this one. But, it'll really make this deck tick since you're putting so much into the graveyard. So we're going into sorceries next. We've got Cave In, which is 2 red, 3 colorless, sorcery speed. You may remove a red card in your hand from the game instead of paying Cave In's mana cost. So that's pretty cool right there. It's potentially a free cast. Cave In deals 2 damage to each creature and each player. So, man, when you're running stuff like, Death Pits of Wrath here, where it's, you're doing that 2 damage to each creature, and you're sitting there and you also have Petulant Spirit out, or either or, then you're able to knock out a whole bunch of stuff with this free cast spell. You can hit big stuff too. Well, what if they have Indestructible? Oh, well, I got you covered on that one too. So then let's look at let's see here, Hour of Devastation. So Hour of Devastation is a 2 red, 3 colorless. It's a sorcery as well. All creatures lose Indestructible until end of turn. Hour of Devastation deals 5 damage to each creature and each non-bolus planeswalker. So there you go. You're getting rid of that Indestructible, and if you've got your Cave In, if you have your Death Pits of Wrath out, if you have your Petulant Spirit out, either one of those, then you've got Death Touch that's coming on top of that for the bigger creatures. So you can really get rid of a lot of big stuff quick. It's pretty efficient for what it is. Let's go back up here and look at the big spells and sorcery. So we've got Decree of Annihilation. So this is your oh man, it's all going to hell. So you got 2 red, 8 colorless. Remove all artifacts, creatures, lands, graveyards, and hands from the game. You can pay 2 red, 5 colorless to cycle it, and when you cycle the Decree of Annihilation, destroy all lands. This is a pretty brutal card. It's expensive at 10, but at this point in the game, if you're playing something like this, you probably need it. You can rebuild pretty quick too, I'm assuming. A lot of times I would dump my mana and then play Anje and try to pull some cards from that. But, or you could just cycle it and destroy all lands if you need to. We've got Diabolic Intent after that, if I can get on it real good. So 1 black, 1 colorless for sorcery. As an additional cost to play a Diabolic Intent, sacrifice a creature. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle your library. I mean, it's pretty simple. How you're putting this in. I've got 1 tutor in here, and it's Diabolic Intent. You're having that sacrifice a creature outlet, so to me, that's well worth it. But as far as things that you need to get, most of the time you're drawing into it, and you may get stuck into this situation to where Anje's off the field and you're not able to draw, or you need to get that momentum going. So then, sure, go for that tutor if you've, use that tutor if you've got to. But let's go on to the next ones here in a sec. All right, let's continue on here. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is going to be Dry Spell. This is going to be another one of those mass removals if you really have your Death Touch stuff out that we were talking about earlier, Death Pits of Wrath, and or the Petulant Spirit. So Dry Spell is 1 black, 1 colorless. Dry Spell deals 1 damage to each creature and player. So you're pinging your opponents with that 1 damage, but really, I mean, come on, 2 drop to possibly remove everything on the field if you've got Death Pits of Wrath out or you have Petulant Spirit. I mean, it's a pretty good value right there. Flame Wave is next. This is another great card. So you're looking at 4 red, 3 colorless. Flame Wave deals 4 damage to target player and each creature he or she controls. So just another way to, really get rid of a bunch of stuff. Galvanic Relay. 1 red, 2 colorless. Exile the top card of your library. During your next turn, you may play that card, and it has Storm. So a lot of times there's a lot of really cheap spells in here. A lot of ways to play some of these spells for pretty cheap. So Galvanic Relay will be able to storm off pretty easily. You'll have to wait for that next turn to happen, but still, you're banking that up pretty good. Grim Discovery's up next here. So you got 1 black, 1 colorless. I think I've talked about this 2 or 3 times this week. It's one of my favorite cards in black. It's 1 black, 1 colorless, but sorcery speed, of course. You choose one or both. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or return target land card from your graveyard to your hand. You'll more than likely have both of these things in your graveyard because you'll be chunking. I've chunked lands quite a bit in this deck because I don't really need them after a certain point. And you'll have creatures in there that you've chunked off of Anje, so this is a great way to get those back. Hour of Devastation, we've already talked about that one. Jessica's Will, I mean, why wouldn't you have this in there? It's one of the best cards in red right now aside from Underworld Breach. You got 1 red, 2 colorless. Choose one. If you control a commander as you cast a spell, you may choose both. Add red for each card in target opponent's hand. Or exile top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. You still have to pay for them because you're playing them. You're not casting them without paying their mana cost, but I mean, it's still pretty great. You can do a lot of that. A lot of times it combos with itself. So, Karavuk's Purge. It's a red, a black, and X. Destroy target creature with casting cost equal to X. If that creature is put into the graveyard this way, Karavuk's Purge deals to the creature's controller an amount of damage equal to the creature's power. So a lot of times if there's a really big creature out there, a lot of times that happens where there's like an 80-80 on the field. Sling this out there. It's pretty solid. You can probably dump 5-6 mana into that X and you're knocking out an opponent. Last Rites. 1 black, 2 colorless. Discarding number of cards. Target player reveals his or her hand. Then you choose a non-land card from it. For each card discarded this way, that player discards those cards. So I put this in here in case you really need to get some discards off, but also so that you can get rid of their hand if you need to. A lot of times I'll wind up just chunking it if I'm not really in a position where I need to play it. But it's still a good option, especially if playing against blue. Meltdown. 1 red X. Destroy each artifact with total casting cost X or less. You're really going to be putting 1, maybe 2 into X. Maybe 5 at max. So you're really getting rid of a lot of stuff. You'll probably hit your own stuff too. But, this is a fantastic card to get rid of a bunch of artifacts across the board. Mizzix's Mastery. So 1 red, 3 colorless. Exile target card that's an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, copy it, and you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Then you exile Mizzix's Mastery. However, you can overload this for 3 red, 5 colorless. When you overload it, you may cast this spell for its overload cost. If you do, change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. Oh man. I'll tell you what. The great thing about this is you've got a stock graveyard, I'm sure, from playing this. By the time that you get around this and you want to overload it, and you've got 8 mana to spare, you've got, probably 15 or 16 cards in that graveyard. Shit, you start slinging this out there and playing all that stuff, get out of here. Well, maybe not that many, but you'll have quite a bit in there. You can really go off with this one. Molten Disaster. 2 red and X with a kicker cost red. You may pay an additional red as you cast a spell. If Molten Disaster was kicked, it has split second. I mean, what else do you really want from this, But then it says Molten Disaster deals X damage to each creature without flying and each player. Like I was saying before, there's 3 or 4 decent dragons in here that fly. So, you've got quite a bit of flyers that are going. And the big thing is that you've got the split second on it so that nothing else can go into the stack with it. And then you're doing that damage to each creature without flying and each player. Terminal Agony. This is another one of the madness cards in here. So it costs red, black, 2 colorless, destroy target creature, and of course it has a madness of red and black. So a lot of times you're casting this for the madness cost because you want to be able to discard it, draw a card, then untap, play this, and untap Anje Falkenrath. Then we've got Unearth, which is 1 black. Choose target creature card in your graveyard, total casting cost 3 or less. Put that creature into play, and it has cycling of 2 colorless. A lot of times Unearth is so you can bring Anje back. That's what I've been doing with it, really. You can go for other stuff like Pestilent Spirit, because he's running at a 3 converted mana cost. But yeah, you can do quite a bit of these creatures in this deck you can hit with Unearth. So then the last of the sorceries, we have Wild Guess. 2 red, as an additional cost to cast Wild Guess, discard a card. Easy peasy. And you draw 2 cards off of that. So there's not much else to say about that one. It's just a great way to start getting some cards and building that momentum. Now we'll move into the instants. We only have 8 of these. Battle Hymn. Add red to your mana pool for each creature you control. So, I didn't really go too crazy into like building tokens or anything to this. So it costs 1 red and 1 colorless to do this. I might take it out of this deck and replace it with something else, but it's still a good option to have in this deck, I feel like. Then we have Dark Ritual, which add 3 black mana to your mana pool. Then we got Darkness. So this is a defensive spell. I'm very fond of it. I've been running in all my black decks that I build. So 1 black, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Why wouldn't you want to have that and you're running black? It's a great card. Surprisingly, it's popped up to about $20 right now. I'm pretty sure it was an uncommon in the last, maybe it was the Time Spiral we mastered. I'm not sure. I've got quite a few of them though. They're very good. Delirium. If I can get it to pop up here. So Delirium is a red, black, and a colorless. Play only on target opponent's turn. Tap target creature that player controls. That creature deals to the player an amount of damage equal to its power. The creature neither deals nor receives combat damage this turn. So you're stopping it from hitting you, but that creature is getting its damage. Well, its power and toughness is being dealt to its controller. So that's a pretty cool thing. That's another way that you can one-shot somebody, but this one's at instant speed. Then you've got Fire Covenant. 1 red, 1 black, 1 colorless. Fire Covenant deals X damage divided any way you choose among any number of target creatures, where X is equal to the amount of life that you pay. Effects that prevent or redirect damage cannot be used to counter this loss of life. So if you're sitting with a pretty decent amount of life, there's not really any life gain in this deck, but hard times, desperate times call for desperate measures. This is a great spell to play, just with anybody. Pulse of the Forge, man. Let me tell you something. This is one of my favorite cards in this deck, and I want to do an entire build with this, just based around this card. The last few games I've played, this has really come in clutch. So you've got 2 red, 1 colorless, instant speed, of course. Pulse of the Forge deals 4 damage to target player. Then if that player has more life than you, return Pulse of the Forge to its owner's hand. Now you just have to take me a minute here. I've got something I want to pull up, so I'm going to go find it. And it really works well with Pulse of the Forge. So just give me 1 sec. Alright, so this is what I went and found for you that's going to work really well with Pulse of the Forge. This is going to be a little bit off topic as far as the deck goes. But the reason that I figured out how well this works is from Hellkite Tyrant. I was playing that test game and wound up stealing this from the Guru Spores God deck that I built. So Crumbling Sanctuary is 5 colorless artifact. For each 1 damage that would be dealt to a player, that player removes the top card of his or her library from the game instead. So what wound up happening was during that game, I had stolen, well, not me personally, I'm playing by myself, but Hellkite Tyrant had picked that up from the other side of the board and had it on this one. So whenever I was playing Pulse of the Forge for that, 2 red, 1 colorless, I would hit the other deck for 4 damage, but that damage wasn't going to that player, so instead I would be milling 4 cards off the top of that deck. And because of that other player life total wouldn't change. So then, at a certain point, you know, the Anje deck is sitting at 25 health, and the Spores deck is sitting at 31. And so I keep slinging Pulse of the Forge out, and every time I'm milling 4 cards off the top of that Guru Spores deck. And I would keep playing it and keep playing it because he had more life. The Pulse of the Forge would turn right back to my hand. And as it goes on through that game, and I built the momentum, I'm able to sling it out 2 or 3 times a turn, maybe even 4, depending on how much mana I have set up. So then it got me thinking about building a black and red, not really mill, but a library exile deck, which is something I've been working on for a minute. Which is where the entire point of the deck that you're playing is just to exile your opponent's decks. It's a really fringe strategy. It's not that great, but I think with Pulse of the Forge you could really do something with that. It's a pretty neat little combo. I don't think I'm going to put it in this deck because, I don't really want to do the mill with this one. I just want to do direct damage, but it's something interesting to think about. Let's move on to the last 2 instances here. We've got Reap in the Graves. So black, 2 colorless, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and then it has Storm. So it's pretty obvious what you want to do with this. You want to play a lot of those spells, small creatures, things like that, so you can storm off, get your creatures that you've discarded into your graveyard back into your hand. A lot of times you can pull 2 or 3 that way. So it's not too bad. And then the last instant we have is Spontaneous Combustion. So red, black, 1 colorless. Sacrifice a creature, Spontaneous Combustion deals 3 damage to each creature. Pretty solid, in my opinion. More than likely that creature you're sacrificing is probably going to die anyway. You're doing that damage to each creature, and if you get your Death Pit's Wrath out again, or you have your Pestilent Spirit, then you've just made yourself a pretty decent board wipe there. So next up, we've got the artifacts. So this is going to be pretty simple. We have Arcane Signet, Commander Sphere, Gilded Lotus. So Hammer of Porphyros, you may not have known of. It's 2 red, 1 colorless. Creature you control of haste. It's a legendary enchantment artifact. You can pay 1 red, 2 colorless, tap it, sacrifice a land, put a 3/3 colorless golem enchantment artifact creature token on the battlefield. So it's in there to give stuff haste. Also sack lands, because sometimes this deck gets flooded in them because you're able to play a land each turn most of the time. The next one we've got is pretty interesting talismans that I picked up. So you've got a 2 colorless Hematite Talisman. Its ability is 3, untap target permanent. Uses this ability only when a red spell is successfully cast, and only once for each red spell cast. So my thoughts of putting this in here was that I don't really have a lot of madness stuff to untap her to draw a card. But I do have a lot of stuff I want to discard most of the time. And a lot of times that's lands that I get off the draw. So then I might play, a little 1-drop blue red spell, and there's quite a few of these you can get by. And then you just pay 3 to untap her, tap her again, and you're discarding and drawing. This is a way that I'm getting around madness, in my opinion. And then there's the other, I'm not sure, there it is, Onyx Talisman. So this is 2 colorless, and this is 3, untap target permanent. Use this ability only when a black spell successfully cast, and only once for each black spell cast. So this is the other side of it too. There's a lot of these 1 and 2, maybe even 3-drop black spells in this deck. So you're able to do this 3 to untap Anje with the Onyx Talisman. So, it's pretty cool. I've been wanting to do something with these for a minute. I didn't really have anything I needed them for. But if you're playing something that does like infinite mana combo and you're in these colors, maybe that's an option. They make 1 for each color. So there's these talismans that are in, all the colors. And I think I have them all. They're really neat, and I was pretty excited to be able to put them in this deck. So in between these, you've got Library of Ling. So 1 colorless, skip your discard phase. Now this is a really interesting part of it. When a spell or effect forces you to discard a card, you may instead discard that card from the top of your library. This is one of my kind of MVPs for this deck. It's a pretty neat little thing that it does. One, it's kind of giving you no maximum hand size, but not really. It's just saying that you're skipping your discard phase. But whenever you discard with Anje, if you don't actually want to discard from your hand, or you know what you have set up on top of your deck, then Library of Ling says, alright, well, just discard the top of your deck then. So you can do that, and you can build up your hand size if you need to do things later on. This is a really cool use for this card, I feel like. And one of my favorite mechanics that's included in this deck. Another reason why I built this deck, and this is one of the things that I've held on to in order to build this deck. Then, of course, we have a Soul Ring, Talisman of Indulgence, which is just in these colors, and then the Thaumatic Compass, the second or third time I've talked about this card this week. So 2 colorless, it's an artifact. It has 3 colorless. Tap it, search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shelf your library. At the beginning of your end step, if you control 7 or more lands, transform Thaumatic Compass. So before we go to the flip, let's talk about how great this card is. It's already settling around $3 to $7, depending on where you go to look for it. Most of the time you can pick it up for like $3. If you can, I would. It's a great card. I think just about every deck, except for green, they don't really need it. Every deck that doesn't have access to good lands should pick this one up. For this deck, it's doing double duty. So it's going to get you those lands so that you can build that mana base up. And usually with this deck, because the converted mana cost is pretty low, you're able to do a lot with 6 lands, maybe even 7. So a lot of times I'm using this to go get a land to have something to discard to Anje, right? And I never really build up to the 7 until I actually need to play some of the bigger spells. Instead, I'm trying to cycle through those lands to draw good stuff from the deck. The flip side of it is kind of a defensive measure. So it turns into Spires of Orizaka. So tap, add colors to your mana pool, or untap target attacking creature and opponent controls, and remove it from combat. So it's another defensive thing. A lot of times, once you've built up that 7 mana, and you don't want to do it anymore, and you just go ahead and start dropping your lands down, and you flip it, you want to have something that you can remove your opponent's commander from combat. So this is a pretty neat ability. This is just a great card in general, and I would suggest anybody, if you can get it, put it in any deck you want. So lands, I didn't really do anything crazy with lands. I was going for a casual build with this. So Bloodfell Caves, these will all pretty much be tap lands. Drossforge Bridge, Haunted Ridge, which is the new one from the Innistrad. It's quite good. Honestly, it's a dual land that usually doesn't come into play tap. 15 Mountains, Myriad Landscape. I always play a Myriad Landscape in your deck. Well, there's not 2 of them in here. There's only 1. And then a Rogue's Passage, so that you can make things unblockable. A lot of times you want to do that with Conspiracy Theorist, or you want to do that with your Dragons, and then 15 Swamps. I mean, really, that's it. That's the deck. It's a pretty neat build. Like I said, I've played it a couple times. I'm pretty excited to see if I can play it in person at some point. But if you have any comments about this, if you want to make some additions to it, I'm going to put the deck list into the description of the video, so feel free to check it out there. And you can, the link to the deck list will be in the description of the video. You can leave some comments down there if you want to build on it some more. Feel free to, go for it and make this build happen and play around with it. It's a pretty fun one. I'm going to try to play it in person at some point. But have a good one.